And nobody can tell this lady that 10:30 a.m. is too early for a glass of wine, buddy. Listen, I gotta tell you, when you have two kids, the kids are screaming and there are all these people depending on you, you gotta make dinner, you realize this is all there is, you know? Maybe you want a little glass of wine, it's not gonna hurt anybody. You work, you live an unbearably boring life as you hurtle faster every day towards death. Ayara is kind of an interesting character. She marries a new guy every year after sending her husbands to look for the Cauldron of Eternity, which is kind of a crappy artifact from Throne of Eldraine. So then the Phyrexians invaded. She's sitting there, she's drinking her wine, it's 10 a.m., she's about 2 deep, she's like, fine, whatever, I don't even care. Anything is better than this stupid place. She's like that lady from Britain who joined ISIS. You know, yeah, complete me. You know, I don't care, me and Glissa are gonna have mojitos and talk about what a grunch Elish Nord is. I think she's so pretty, but she's just so stuck up. Alright, I'm going to give you guys a bit of insight into how I build decks in this video without going into the really boring stuff. We're building a Wine Mom Commander deck, and that's pretty good for 60 bucks. It's pretty close to what you pay for a precon after tax and shipping. This is built with that in mind, can hang with higher power levels with a high degree of interaction. Hey fellas, listen, hit all those buttons, alright? Engage with the content, blah blah blah. You can buy me a coffee at the link in the description if you're feeling like a particularly generous soul. There she is, raising a glass to the Phyrexians to all the doom. Ayara, Widow of the Realm, 1 black for a legendary creature, elf noble, it's a 3/3. Has tap, sacrifice another creature or artifact. Ayara, Widow of the Realm, deals X damage to target opponent or battle and you gain X life, where X is the sacrifice permanent's mana value. Alright, so on the front we have a sacrifice outlet, and it doesn't specify non-token. This taps to sacrifice, so we generally aren't doing this more than once per turn unless we're running some untappers. We also want fairly high mana value creatures or artifacts to sacrifice so we can maximize our damage. Mana value is also a copyable attribute. Say I use a card like Heat Shimmer to put a copy of my opponent's Consecrated Sphinx onto the battlefield. The token has a mana value for purposes of Ayara's activated ability, so if I sack the token to her, I'm doming someone for 6 damage and gaining 6 life. This life gain is not inconsequential, and that's a theme you could build into as well. Transforms into Ayara Furnace Queen. So this is a black and red legendary creature, Phyrexian Elf Noble, it's a 4/4. At the beginning of combat on your turn, return up to 1 target artifact or creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. This is a Reanimator spell that can get back all the stuff we've been sacrificing for late game shenanigans. This isn't the main game plan I built into with this deck. Alright, let's summarize here. We have a commander that leans into reanimation and sacrifice, but not the mass sacrifice that would lead us easily into aristocrat territory. We want to be sacrificing 1 big creature or artifact per turn for big damage. It's an interesting build around for sure. Having a sacrifice outlet in the command zone lends itself to having interaction targeting opponent's creatures to sacrifice for our pleasure. If you want a different flavor, see my ever-changing Dane deck list. I actually have 2 lists on my Mox field if you want to take a look at those. Again, you want as many creatures that have threaten effects as you can possibly pack in the deck. Alright, we want big creatures to sacrifice, but where the heck are we getting these creatures? Well, there are a few places. We have Reanimation, we have Token Copy, and we have Theft. I know, some of you find a Theft archetype distasteful, leaves a bad taste in your mouth. You feel like a bad guy, but you gotta get over that, buddy. This is Ayara, she's a pretty brutal elf noble. She goes and hunts people for fun, dude, like the most dangerous game with iced tea. And the time for scruples is done. We want some death triggers that can help us to maintain board control and board advantage as well. So let's talk about some different ways to get cards into the yard to reanimate. There's several spells that are pretty efficient to get us there. Now remember, this is a creature-based deck, so we want as many of these effects to be on creatures as possible. You have the old Azra Oddsmaker. This is a great discard outlet. And if our fortunes are favorable, we're packing in an invasive creature, we can refill our hands a little bit. I like that she's keeping that table in line, you know what I mean? Your table gets out of line, you stab the fear of God right into it, dude. And you got Chainer, Nightmare Adept. It's just a solid Reanimator enabler, pretty formidable budget deck in its own right. This guy's pretty powerful if you build around him. Too bad he's got 2 toughness. That guy needs to spend less time on his goatee and get back in the gym, dude. Good old Jaxus, dude. This is a card I seem to put in a lot of decks lately. This does a couple things. It's a discard outlet for Reanimator shenanigans. Creates a token copy of a creature we control that will draw us a card when we sack it using our commander's ability. And you can blitz it out, which does all that, plus draw us a card when it dies. We can even sack Jax's if we blitz it out for efficiency as well. And you got Rowdy Crew. Even looks like Roddy Piper out there. Maybe not such a great card, but this was a fun include that lets you lean into Red's randomness. The thing with the ETB is that you can copy it or recur it. You're bound to fill your yard with good stuff and big fat creatures to reanimate. Everything counts in large amounts. Ruin Grinder is a very interesting card. It's a bit overcosted for what it does normally, but the ability to wheel on sacrifice can be really good in this deck, where we want to feed the graveyard and maintain card advantage. Keep in mind your opponents don't have to wheel, it's a May ability. But remember that it has mountain cycling as well, so you start with a Reanimator spell but nothing in the yard, then cycle that bad boy. And similarly, we have our old buddy, the Scion of Darkness. He's a fantastic include. I love how absolutely metal this guy is. He's basically just a big hunky dude. He's got no face, he doesn't care. He's jacked in the back, stacking packs of smack. He can put himself in the graveyard, and that's what a real bro does for his bros. He just crawls into a hole just so you get the satisfaction of digging him out later. There's a couple other spells that facilitate discard. We got Faithless Looting, and this is just a classic card. Tormenting Voice, Cathartic Reunion. These are cheap. We can cast these before we even get our commander out on the battlefield. Cathartic Reunion, what the heck kind of name is that for a card anyway? This thing looks like a dang Hallmark card is what it is. Alright, so our game plan's going great. We have some big impactful creatures in the graveyard. How are we digging them out? We got the Body Launderer over here with his fancy haircuts. He cleans the bodies, dude. He injects them with goo and he looks like Finn Whitrock from American Horror Story. This guy has a great discard outlet and a great card to sacrifice to get back a non-rogue creature. Guess what? There's only one other rogue in the entire deck. Alright, hang on, break time. We're going to take a break from the Reanimator creatures and talk about some card draw creatures because this is where the rogue goes, and that's Morbid Opportunist. This little thief is here along with Grim Haruspex and Midnight Reaper. Listen, we gotta draw cards and creatures are dying, so these guys are here with their bigger, better buddy, Harvester of Souls. Each of these has their own little idiosyncrasies, so read the card and remember that. Alright, back to Reanimator creatures. We got Puppeteer Clique. This is a great card. It's 5 mana if you want to sack it. That's 5 damage and 5 life gain from Ayara. And then it comes back for more, dude. Note that it can only get creatures from opponents' graveyards, so you gotta be filling up their yards too. You got Phyrexian Delver out there looking fine, looking lovely. It's got a couple faces on it, who cares? I prefer the older art because it looks sick dog. I like the old clunky Phyrexians. So this is Reanimated on a stick, and this is a great sack target for Ayara as well. And you got Whisper over here whispering to the gathered members of the Hair Club for Men. What's this person whispering about? You know what I mean? I can put a sweet hairpiece on there. Nobody's ever gonna know. It's gonna be your little secret. And then they go out and it looks like a dang squirrel up there. So remember, you can do this at instant speed and you can use Whisper as one of the 2 creatures you sacrifice if you want to. Incarnation Technique, very slept on card, great commander card, and though it isn't a creature, it can get us 2 creatures back from the graveyard, and that's great. The mill on this is fantastic as well. You have such a density of creatures in this deck, you're bound to hit something. This guy looks like a retired biker. Feldon of the Third Path basically just needs 1 threatened creature in the graveyard and he becomes a must-remove threat. Feldon works down at the Real Doll Company now. He's a head designer. Get it? Head. Clone Shell. This is a weird card. 5 generic mana for an artifact creature shapeshifter. It's a 2/2. Has Imprint. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, then put the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. When it dies, turn the exiled card face up. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield under your control. We have 43 creatures in this deck. Probably going to hit a creature, right? This is what happens when Goro gets captured by Lando Calrissian. Got frozen in Carbonite. Now the Butcher and Malik here, this is a great reanimation target, a great sacrifice target, and a great payoff for sacrificing other creatures to maintain board control. He's the Oprah Winfrey of Magic cards, right? You get a dead creature, you get a dead creature. How about Doomweaver? This is just Shelob from Lord of the Rings' older cousin. This card is so dumb. It sucks that this has 1 power. It's pretty good in this deck though. Soulbond works when either creature enters the battlefield. Look at this guy out here. He hates sleeves, dude. He won't hear of it. Sun's out, guns out. You lose control of Karn the Betrayer when it leaves the battlefield or another player gains control of it. So if you sack it, you get the 2 cards. He just wants blood. That's it, buddy. And we got the old Orca over there, just punching the top off of a building. It's everybody's fantasy. Orca Siege Demon loves when stuff dies, whether it be your creatures or another player's creatures. Then it wants to die later, right? If you had no counters on it and you sack it to Ayara, it will deal 13 damage to somebody. Stalking Vengeance. This thing wants other creatures to die too. This is such wild art, dude. I really dig it. It's vengeance. It's the night. It's Batman, brother. Alright, we also want to be making some clones and some copies out there. It's Attack of the Clones, yeah. Delina Wildmage and Rionia are just a clone per turn. If you're lucky, maybe two. Sacrifice them for fun and profit. These two ladies are out there like Rachel and Monica from Friends. They're cloning your other creatures and making friends of their own that you can mercilessly murder later. Now, Flame Rush Rider. This is a nice card because you can dash him out to clone a big creature. If you can get him through combat, you can dash him out once every turn. Mirage Phalanx. This is another soul bonder. It's great at making clones, and you can pair it up with one of our threat and effect creatures for maximum mayhem and board control. Nightmare Shepherd. This thing definitely likes creatures dying, but can make token copies on death, and those tokens retain their copyable attributes like mana value and their ETB effects. Alright, if you guys didn't know what I was talking about when I said threaten effects, I'm talking about creatures like this. These are our threatened creatures, cards like Zealous Conscripts, Coercive Recruiter, as well as Molten Primordial and Conquering Manticore. We also have Furbog Flutist and Opportunistic Dragon. The dragon can snag a human or artifact only, but the artifact part is salient as our commander can sacrifice artifacts with her ability. These are great in this deck to recur, to sacrifice, to clone, or to make copies of, keep the board completely clear. Now, since we're gaining life, cards like Sanguine Bond and Vito, the old guy making spaghetti sauce, made it in the deck as well. This can get us through the mid-game because this deck is a little slower than some of the decks maybe you're used to. It's not low down and dirty, it's about controlling the board and sacrificing our opponent's creatures. I didn't build heavily into this Lifegain theme, but Lifegain can be very potent in black if you wanted to maximize payoffs for that. Now this deck is rounded out with some more draw, some other creatures that advance our strategy, some removal, some more reanimation, and clone spells. I didn't go too deep into the theft spells because that can be obnoxious or oppressive, but if that's your jam, just go nuts. You know, try it, goldfish it. This is a hard $60, dude. You can't beat that price. If you ever wanted to win with a board-looking noble drinking wine, this is your deck because Paris Hilton doesn't have a card yet. Snicky G from Better Commander signing off.